Hello, my friends. How are you today? Just to make sure it's recording, I'm still using this crappy camera. It's a good camera, but the screen doesn't work on it any longer, and hopefully the angle's right and everything. Not too bright. That sun behind me is kind of a killer. I guess I should put my shades on even though I'm not facing it. Anyhow, how's it going, everybody? I'm kind of doing this video, well, shit. All my videos are off the top of my head. You know, I always freestyle it. Very often, or very rarely do I actually take notes, but I like to have some substance at least, so I'm not just sitting there rambling. So I probably would do better to make lists on certain videos, but when I let it flow, it's more a matter of talking and learning from my own thoughts. You know, like when we dream, our mind tells us what we need to know, and subconsciously, if we're paying attention, we learn to see our weaknesses and maybe where we're going wrong in life, or perhaps something that's bothering us that we're not aware of. Dreams aren't always this way, but quite often they are, and they're very symbolic, and we know this, but there's also this time of night where you can wake up. For example, at 4 a.m. I woke up today, and I couldn't get back to sleep for a while. It took me about, I don't know, half an hour or so. Then I started thinking about negative things in life that maybe I should change, or need to change, want to change. And I'm aware that this is the time of night where these things come up. And it used to happen to me a lot. I had much more anxiety when I was younger, or say in my 30s, early 30s. And I learned to conquer it. And that was one of the motivational factors why I started seeking my own version of enlightenment, if you will, which is where this video is going to go eventually. But, and that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, that don't dare use that word enlightenment, because then you're, you know, insinuating that you're somehow aware of things that other people aren't. And I'm here to basically dispute that notion, because that's not what it's about. But anyhow, we, I guess to get right into it, I should just dig right into that one, because that's really the main point of this. But waking up in the morning, they call it, I looked up, it's called catastrophism, I believe, and it's where things that you need to work on compound, and they might not even be issues. What leads to insomnia for people, and I'm so grateful I don't have insomnia. What leads to insomnia quite often is this recurring cycle. It's a vicious cycle of not getting enough sleep, and therefore worrying that you're not going to have a good day because you didn't get enough sleep. Then throughout the day worrying that you might not get to sleep that night, and it's a feedback loop. And this happens to divert to psychedelics. When you're in a psychedelic experience, this is how bad trips occur. People have a feedback loop, and when you're in that state, you're much more susceptible to negative feedback loops, which you think about something that could happen, and then it repeats, and pretty soon you're worrying about everything. I use that as an example because I believe when you're in that heightened state of awareness in a psychedelic experience, it's very similar when you're waking up from that heightened state of awareness in a dream or after sleeping, which I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a heightened state. Get out of here, bee. I'm always harassed by bees. So, anyhow, the idea of enlightenment is something that's, I think, misunderstood in the sense that it has connotations that go back into Eastern mysticism, and that's what I wanted to mention here to start off. The actual definition of enlightenment from the etymology dictionary, you know, it was from the 1600s, okay, the 1660s, so it doesn't go back very far, not as far as one might think, but the action of enlightening, from enlightenment, used only in figurative sense, a spiritual enlightenment, etc. Attested from in 1865 as a translation of German Aufklärung. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. Aufklärung, a name for the spirit of independent thought and rationalistic system of 18th century continental philosophers. So it's kind of interesting that enlightenment, you know, the age of enlightenment, we speak of the, you know, these times, but enlightenment often has a religious connotation to it, which I find interesting because it's the essence of discovering truth without needing a framework to work within, without a religious connotation or dogma. And I'd like to say that I'm not necessarily opposed to religion, because I know that people can turn anything into a religion. It's our inner yearning to understand. It's not religion that's the problem. Like I've said before, it's dogma. It's attaching to your beliefs where everyone else is wrong. Which really does bring me to something I wanted to talk about, but I'll get to that. It says here, for the philosophes, man was not a sinner, at least not by nature, human nature. Get out of here, B. Seriously, I'm not your home. I don't have anything for you. Human nature, and this argument was subversive, in fact revolutionary in their day. Whoops. My phone keeps turning off here. Or at least, okay, this argument was subversive, in fact revolutionary in their day, is by origin good, or at least neutral. Despite the undeniable power of man's antisocial passions, therefore, the individual may hope for improvement through his own efforts, through education, participation in politics, activity in behalf of reform, but not through prayer. And that's from Peter Gay, The Enlightenment. And the reason I read that one is because I found the last part interesting. But not through prayer. That would even be included in such a text. I had to think about what the intention of that was. And I say it was definitely not to piss on religion, by the way it was defined in the text, but not through prayer. Being specific about that, I think what was intended was to convey the idea that wishful thinking doesn't compete with action, and we as humans have the ability to take action. And I think this is why a lot of folks are frustrated with religions in general, is because they feel like while there is a lot of charity and people helping one another, there's also a lot of judgment, a lot of war, a lot of punishment over not following religious laws or texts. But we as humans have to reconcile that and figure out how we can cope and have and be enlightened in the sense of knowing who we are, knowing as best we can who we are. And that's really kind of one of the main focuses here of the discussion. I was going to read a couple more things, but I decided against it because it relates to what I'm talking about. But I'm cautious not to offend, not for the sake of not wanting to make people, for not wanting to upset people who may have a tentative grasp on what they believe or what they think they believe. I would like to say outright that I don't pretend to know what's going on in the world as far as where we come from spiritually, where we're going, how the universe formed. There's lines of thinking that say that, are scientists religious? If you're going to believe in the Big Bang Theory, well, we have a lot of evidence to point towards a Big Bang Theory, but nobody saw it and there's no actual witnesses. It's one of those things just like God, where people can argue, well, there's a lot of evidence for God. And the reason I'm bringing in the theology argument here is because I read an article earlier from mistakes Christians make, but I wasn't looking at an atheist website because I'm very appalled by the way that so-called atheists conduct themselves. If you consider yourself an atheist and you go out and you seek out religious text and religious conversations in order to tell people how wrong they are, to troll them. I've seen some very vile actions. I've also seen some very well-spoken and good-intended, writings that people post to say, hey, perhaps you could consider this point of view. And I will say that even though the atheists can be quite assholes, many of the Christians will end up attacking the atheist. This is because they're both looking at each other from the wrong standpoint, as lesser people. And it was 5 things, it was a missionary group who was having this meeting, and it was on, I think, it was one of the bigger Christian websites. It was this little blog, and the guy wrote 5 things that we do wrong, and he asks all his classes in his church of, how are we liars when we go out and preach the word? And he says that every single time, he says he's asked this question 20 times or more in these Bible classes, and at first nobody says anything, and within 5 seconds people start raising their hands. And being honest, he was saying that most of the way is the way that they preach to other people. He said that you can't deny that they're belittled because of their belief. And here you are as a Christian telling a person, this is the truth, this is what I believe, and you believe it unconditionally, 100%. You're not going to waver in your thoughts. And this person says, well, I believe this, but I respect what you believe, and you tell them they're wrong. Well, who's the person who's causing problems? Is it the Christian who's not respecting in the way that they're respected by another person? But then let's just say that other person may just say they respect the Christian and really not. It's kind of a joke. We don't really profess our true feelings to one another as much as we should. But some of the conversations that take place can be very productive, because ultimately people want to know that their beliefs are safe. They're safe from criticism, but none are, because beliefs mean that you have decided how things are. And you have put yourself in a situation where you have to defend what you believe in order to get others to believe it, if that's your mission. So if your religion has nothing to do with, sharing with others, then it minds its own business, so to speak. Like most, say, Buddhist type offshoots or Zen, it's like if you want to learn it, you go learn it. But they're not going around the world, trying to convert people. But this is why people get frustrated, and I'm bringing this out because I think it's a dialogue that needs to happen. People belittling one another, and this goes both ways. But also, one other thing that guy said, one of the biggest problems is one of his 5 things that Christians lie about, from his standpoint and the people he's talked to in his church, is professing to know, to have more belief and a stronger convictions about what you know than you actually do. And I find that very interesting and very honest coming from a Christian, to say that you're not 100%. And he used the example of, for him, on a scale of 1 to 10, Jesus is a 10 as far as knowing it's true. But Noah's Ark, maybe not, maybe a 3 or a 4. And for some Christians, the minute they open up to saying that parts of the Bible may not be 100% accurate, they instantly criticize that idea. But he brought up the point of, well, if you want to believe everything, then you also have to believe the part where it says, happy is the man who dashes children against the rocks. Or, there's a lot of talk in there about murder and mayhem. And I didn't want to go in that direction. I don't want to talk about the Bible, and that's not my intention here. To get back to the point was, being surrounded by so many people with so many different religions, it's difficult to gauge whether we as a species have the potential to come together and not believe the same thing and not disbelieve the same thing, but to be confident enough in what we have experienced in our lives to know what's really important, which isn't the name that you ascribe to a higher power. It's not the position you sit in, or how you pray, or if you pray. And this is all my subjective opinion, I know this. What really matters is that you're confident in your lack of confidence. And that, to me, is a crucial point. You have to be confident. The greatest wisdom lies in knowing you know nothing. I think Socrates said that, something to that effect. And to understand that it's deeper than it sounds on the surface. Another one is René Descartes. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And that's something that people say, yeah, well, of course, obviously. If you pick it apart and you analyze the actual structure of the philosophy and what he really meant, this is from years of work, not just a thought. This is from the idea that when you have enough discussions with enough people and see enough opinions and have enough information about the world around you, and these philosophers were only exposed to their immediate surroundings. Now we're exposed to the whole world constantly, 24 hours a day. And he realized that he can't know that anything around him is true, what other people are thinking, or where he'll be tomorrow, or if his memory is even intact. But you can know, I think, therefore I am, because you exist right now. And that's the mentality that I try to live my life with. The idea that I live and I exist now. So what can I do to move forward? Hanging on to things from the past is what keeps us down. So to make sure the camera is still running, oh good. It's getting long, but that's alright. The idea that we as individuals have the ability to make decisions for ourselves is something that we take for granted. It wasn't always this way. You were forced to believe in the religion of the state. This is still happening all over the world. And then we have a country now, at least somewhat, where there's freedom to practice, and for me to say this, where I could sit here and I could speak against the church and not be considered a heretic and burned at the stake. And we don't, we are really a bunch of weenies today. We are, especially Americans. Not all, but most of us. And it's even those of us who are aware and we know what's going on and we speak out, we're still just not exposed to that type of adversity that many of our ancestors through history have had to face. And that very adversity is what brings to the table the truth of life, what really matters and what's really important. And that always ends up being love, compassion, acceptance, community, the strength of bonding together, not because we're codependent, although that's a component of it. It's not because we just need other people. It's because we need to share our misery with those around us. Because everyone has misery in their lives. And I'm not talking about depression or anxiety or losing a loved one or a life event happening. I'm talking about the general consensus that all of us have moments where we say, I'm just not so sure. What is this all about? And to be consumed with that all the time would devastate us. Just like to be in the psychedelic mindset all the time. If we were exploring flowers and looking at the beauty, we would have been eaten by lions. But those in the times past. But now we have more protection, and we can sit back and make a decision to say, take a psychedelic, and get a glimpse of what enlightenment really is, which it isn't some learned behavior or practice. It's a Satori-like experience, but it comes in waves. There's no thing you learn where you're enlightened. That's just not the way it is. And if there was, and it can't be shared with, other humans around you. And that's a really crucial component that I would like to mention, is that none of these practices or discoveries or, experiences matter much if they can't be conveyed in layman terms. I posted something on, I think, Facebook the other day to the effect of, just because you use big words and fancy language doesn't mean that what you have to say means a damn thing. Because I see some of the posts that I can tell people sit and take their time, and they use such eloquent wording that I gloss over it. Get to the meat. I want to know. I don't want you to dress up the language with fanciness. I want to know what you have to say. And that's why in the past I used to write poetry, and I always used the biggest words I could. I was young, and now as I get older, I'm so glad I'm not an intellectual and didn't fall into that trap of thinking that knowledge is power as far as academics, that you can really learn, proper English and proper punctuation. I'm a great speller, I'm great with language, but it's not something that I pride myself on. It's just something I'm glad I have because it's useful. But it doesn't mean I have to use the biggest words I know. And I'm mentioning that because philosophy has disguised its discomfort with knowing, the lack of knowledge, with fancy terminology. And some of us, some religions have done the same thing with disguising what they believe in cloaked terms, or trying to explain things that we really don't know and can't know. I hear the ice cream man coming, but I don't want an ice cream. Now my kids are going to come running out here and want one, I bet you anything. So, to get to the point of the enlightenment component of it, I believe that these are small little packets of information and awareness that build up to something where it's not about what we know. Too many people are trying to show what they know instead of experiencing life for what it is and saying it's useful knowledge. Having knowledge for knowledge's sake is wonderful, but knowing what you're going to use that for, I don't know. It's like having a tool. If you can't use the tool, it doesn't do much good to have one. You can show it off, It's like having money you don't spend, Knowledge is meant to make life easier, but in the long run, we all know that life is very complex, and it can be hellacious sometimes. But if you follow the stream and you, I guess the only thing I can say is that, you know, we want to take the path of least resistance, and we want to be able to embrace any of the adversity or negativity or hardships that come our way, because they build who we are and they build our character and they make us stronger. But for all of us to realize, I don't care who you are or what you think you know, it's just what you know. And if you can't share it with others, then it's just yours, and that's fine if it makes you happy. But I think the only way that we're going to break away from dogma and superstition, as opposed to just accepting that things are complicated and strange, that we live in a very strange world we can only see a very small part of, and we don't know where we came from or where we're going. I've always said it's like we're all standing on a multifaceted jewel. Each one of us has our own little facet. And you can see over the horizon somewhat, you can see some of the other people's facets, but you can never see the whole. And if you walk around the other side, you forgot what your side looked like. I mean, that's, to me, it's the best metaphor for knowledge about the universe, if you will, is that we're not meant to know. We as humans have a very small structure of mind in our day-to-day activities. And to return to psychedelics for a minute, I believe this is why I find them such an important tool. Even though we evolved to protect ourselves with fight or flight to escape danger, now that we have the opportunities, we can bring down those borders. Some people say that, you know, you might hear that psychedelics overactivate the brain or create more connections. The truth is, it actually creates less connections. Or should I say calms the mind, in the sense that many of the busy traffic areas in your brain calm down and those connections ease up, and then connections are made between areas that ordinarily aren't used. And you have to realize the brain has a finite capacity. If our brains were much bigger, then it could be catastrophic, because we wouldn't be able to, our brain wouldn't have the speed to communicate with its own cells. Now I'm getting distracted. I really hate those sounds. I hate those things. It's the worst sound. I'll just wait till he passes. I'll leave it at that. I'm going to make another video in a bit. Now I'm distracted. So I'll talk to you all later, and have a wonderful day.